When we left our story, Jacob had finally come home to his father. He's finally back in the land of Canaan, to the land that God is giving to the Jews. This is where the place where he should be, the place of blessing for him. And now Joseph is 17 years old. And we're going to line up here all the family. I want you to kind of see how this family is. And the little boy over on the left, that is Benjamin. And maybe he's about 3 years old now. You can see Jacob. Jacob looks much older now. And here are the all of the brothers. You can see he's talking to Judah there. Can you point out Judah? That's right. And over on the right is Joseph. There he is. He's 17, and he's the next to the youngest. There we go. This whole story we're having today is especially the story of Joseph. Now, Joseph had a job with the family, and that was taking care of sheep. And he was doing it with the 4 sons of the 2 maids. So we've got him out here watching his sheep, and the sons of the maids are Dan and Naphtali and Gad and Asher, and they're working on the sheep. And those older boys, older sons, were not godly. Jacob had not given his heart to Christ, and he was not a father to teach his sons about God, because he himself didn't know God. And these brothers do some bad things when they're out watching the sheep. And so Joseph went home, and he would tell his father what wrong things they were doing. Well, that didn't make those 4 brothers love Joseph very much, because he would go home and tell the father. I wanted to show you something here that's important. Every father back then would choose the son who would inherit twice as much as the other sons and would be the spiritual leader of the rest of the family when the father died. Normally, they chose the oldest son, the firstborn son, normally got that position. Well, the oldest son here is Reuben, Leah's oldest son. But Reuben had done something that was very dishonoring to his father. And Reuben was not godly. He was raised when Jacob was not a believer. And so Jacob decided he would not choose Reuben to be the oldest one to receive double and to be the spiritual head of the family. He decided he would choose the older son of his favorite wife, Rachel. Now, he would in a sense be a prince in the family, because he would be the one who would be the head of the family when the father died. So he got a special coat made for him. And he said, here, I had this coat made for you, and I want you to put it on. I want to see what it looks like on you. And so he put it on. The father said, oh, that's wonderful. I really like that. You're the one that I chose to get the birthright. Well, look at all these other brothers. Now, Benjamin didn't mind. Little Benjamin didn't mind. But the other 10 said, we're all older than he is. How come he's getting this position when he's younger than the rest of us? That's not right. That's not fair. And they were very, very angry and jealous toward Joseph. And it was after this that Joseph started having dreams. And his first dream, he saw a lot of wheat. And there were these sheaves of wheat, and there were 11 of them. And of course, he and the older brothers, there were 11 of them. And one sheaf got there at the top of the dream, and the others all bowed down to him. Well, he told his dream to his brothers because he thought that it was an important dream. I think it was an important dream because God is showing Joseph that not only did his father choose him to have the birthright and be the head of the family, but God's confirming this with Joseph, that God also chose him to be the one that would be the leader of the family. Well, he had another dream, and this one was different. There was the sun and the moon and the stars, and Joseph is standing there, and the sun and the moon and the stars are bowing down. I don't know how you see stars bowing down, but he saw them bowing down to him. Well, he not only told his brothers this dream, he told his father. And his father was sort of puzzled about this. And he said, "You mean your mother and I and your brothers are all going to bow down to you?" The father couldn't understand it. The brothers were jealous and angry. The father just thought, I need to think about this because I'm not quite sure what all this means. Well, the brothers all took the sheep and they went about 50 miles away. The older brothers would leave Joseph and the father there. Let's just take the dream down. There we go. The older brothers went about 50 miles away, and they were taking care of their sheep there. I don't know why they took them that far, but they must have known there was grass there. Well, of course, they had no way to call home or text home, and the father didn't know how they were doing. And so he thought, well, Joseph is 17. He's old enough to have a responsible job. Here, I'm going to send him up to see how his brothers are doing. I don't think the father realized how jealous and angry the brothers were. Here's the brothers, and they're watching the sheep, and they look up, and here comes Joseph. And he's wearing that coat that the father had made for him. And they said, "Oh, there's that dreamer." And they were not happy to see him. And they thought, if we could kill Joseph, then he won't be the one who would be the head of the family, and one of us will get chosen to be the head of the family. And that would be much better. So they decided that they would grab him and kill him and put him in the well. Well, they're going to take his coat off, and Reuben says, no, don't kill him. Just throw him in the well and let him die of thirst. And that way you won't have to shed his blood. So they took the coat off and laid it down, and they dropped Joseph. Oh, look at that. Look at how big Joseph's eyes are. He's terrified. Can you see that? And they drop him in this well. There's no water in the well. It's a dry well. And they say, oh, well, he'll die of thirst. And we didn't kill him. We didn't murder him. So it's all right. Well, the reason Reuben said it, we'll let him fall on down into that well there. The reason Reuben said it was Reuben planned to come back later and get him out. Now, Reuben was the one who was passed over for being the head of the family. But I think as the oldest son, he felt somewhat responsible for the son. The older children should feel responsible. So he was going to come back. Well, the rest of them sat down to eat, and I don't know where Reuben went. He went on an errand. He was gone somewhere. The 9 of them sat down to eat. You know, they didn't care. Joseph was probably starving. He walked for days to get there, and he thought, oh, when I get there, the brothers will give me something to eat. I'm thirsty. Well, when I get there, my brothers will give me a drink. And they threw him in the well. And so Joseph is hungry, and they're sitting down, they're enjoying their eating, and they're not thinking about poor Joseph. And then they see a Ishmaelite caravan coming along. And this is on the caravan route. It's going to Egypt. And they're going to sell all sorts of things, spices and bombs meaning medicine, to Egypt. And Judah gets an idea. He said, well, why don't we just sell Joseph as a slave, and then we won't have killed him. We won't be guilty of killing him. And so they all said, well, that's a great idea. So Judah gets up and talks to the man with the caravan, and Judah decides that he'll sell him, and the man will pay 20 pieces of silver. 20 pieces of silver. And so they pulled Joseph out of the well. And it says later in the Bible that Joseph pleaded for his life, and he was terribly distressed when they pulled him out to sell him to the Ishmaelite traders. Well, the Ishmaelite traders got Joseph. There they go. Look at him. He's got chains on him. Can you see that? His hands are chained. Look, there's a chain around his neck. And they put him on one of those camels, and Joseph is taken away. Well, the brothers finished eating, and they've left. Reuben comes back and thinks, I'm going to get Joseph out of this well, and I'm going to take him home to our father. And he looks in the well, and Joseph is gone. And he tears his clothes. That's what they did back then. If they were upset, they would tear their clothes. And he tore his clothes, and he said, oh, what's going to happen now? He's gone. Joseph's gone, or what are we going to do? And he talks to the brothers and says, oh, what are we going to do? And the brothers all come up with a plan. It's a nasty plan. They decide to take the coat, the Joseph special coat, and they take a goat and kill it, and they dip the blood, tip the coat in the blood of the lamb, making it look like it's Joseph's blood on the coat. Now, we have tests now. You can see if the blood is people blood or animal blood, but they didn't have that back then. The father had no way of knowing. And so they say, we're going to take this home to father and show him. Now, Reuben went along with it. Even though Reuben had planned on rescuing him, he never told father what happened. And so they get back to the father, and they show him the coat. Now, they thought they weren't lying. They said, is this Joseph's coat? They ask it in a question, thinking that it's not a lie. And of course it is, because it was to deceive the father. They said, we found this along the way, and it was covered with blood, and do you think it's Joseph's coat? Well, Joseph starts to cry, Jacob starts to cry, I'm sorry. Look at him, he's crying there, and he's wailing, and he's moaning, and he says, oh, I've lost my Joseph, I'll never be happy again, I've lost my Joseph. And the rest of the family come, and they try to comfort him. And they can't comfort him. If they say, oh, don't cry, Papa, well, there's no way to comfort him, because Joseph is gone. Here, some of the family members come and they try. They say, oh, don't cry, it's all right. But it wasn't all right, because Joseph was gone, and he assumes that Joseph is dead. Well, meanwhile, we can look on the map here, and Joseph is in the caravan. You can see this on the map. He's going from Canaan on these camels, and he's going down to Egypt. And he's being sold as a slave. His hands are in chains, and maybe his feet are in chains. And it's a very hard time for Joseph. He could be very, very angry, and he could say, boy, when I get out of this, I'm going to get even with those brothers. They did an awful thing to me. It's interesting that Joseph doesn't seem to think like that. He thinks, well, I love God, and I guess he has a purpose for this, and I'm going to trust him. We know that he thought like that because he gets down there to Egypt and he's sold to the captain of the guard. The captain of the guard wanted a slave in his house to do chores for him and to do all sorts of things, even keep the money, all sorts of things. At least at first, he may not have realized Joseph had so many skills, but we're going to get Potiphar on here. We've got some Egyptians here. We're going to have a time under this tree of buying a slave. There's Potiphar. Potiphar's the one with his arms crossed, yeah. And he looks Joseph over and he thinks, well, he looks like a strong guy. I think he could do some things for me at our place. And so he buys Joseph. And then he takes him home to his house to introduce him to the family. And now you're going to meet Potiphar's family. Oh, here are some slaves. And this is Mrs. Potiphar. And here's Potiphar. And he comes in the door and he brings Joseph. Oh, Joseph's got to go up. Well, no. Yeah, there. Yeah, he's small. Make him proportional. Mrs. Potiphar is here, and Potiphar's over there closer to Joseph. Okay. Potiphar brings him home to introduce him to the family, and Mrs. Potiphar's there, and the other servants are there. And because Joseph was not angry or bitter, but thought, I need to still please God. God must have a plan for my life. So I'm going to go ahead and try hard with everything I do to please God instead of sitting around and thinking about how me and my brothers were to me. So when Potiphar asks him to do something, he does it the very best that he possibly can because he believes that that is pleasing to God. And he's right, that it is pleasing to God if we do the very best we can with everything we do. And so Potiphar notices that he's really good at everything. And so he dresses Joseph up in a much better outfit here and puts him in charge of the house, puts him in charge of his money and his shopping and the other servants. He puts him in charge of everything. And all Potiphar does is worry about what he's going to eat. He looks like he enjoys eating. And so Joseph does a good job and is still worshiping God. Well, often Potiphar's gone somewhere, and we're going to have Mrs. Potiphar here facing them. Ah, there we go. The Potiphar is not home. There's Mrs. Potiphar, one servant here, and Joseph. And she says, oh, Joseph. She thinks, wow, he's a handsome young man, and he's well built. She said, come on over and give me a kiss. Give me a big hug. And Joseph says, well, no, that would be wrong. My master trusts me with everything. It would be a wicked thing to do. I would never do that. And he walks away from her. Now, I want to show you this. I want you to understand this. When God is going to use somebody for his kingdom, use somebody for some important job, God's going to give them a temptation. Do you remember Adam and Eve? They were in the garden, and God tempted them by allowing Satan to come and saying, oh, you can eat of the fruit? And you remember Adam and Eve fell for the temptation. Well, every time he was in the house and saw Mrs. Potiphar, she rushed over into him and said, oh, Joseph, come give me a kiss. And every time he'd say, no, no, no. Well, one day he came in and there were no servants in the house. And Mrs. Potiphar wasn't in the house. And Joseph was there, and he had a lot of chores that Potiphar had left for him to do. Potiphar's off on a trip, I think. And so Joseph busies himself around doing what he needs to do. And Mrs. Potiphar walks in. And she says, oh, I want you to pretend that you're my husband. My husband's gone, and I want you to come with me and be my husband for today. And can you see she has her hand on his blue robe? Do you see that? He says, no, no, that's wrong. And he pulls his arms out of the robe and he runs out, and she's left just holding the robe. And she thinks, he didn't do what I asked him to do. And she's angry. She thinks, I'm going to get even with him for making fun of me and treating me this way. So she screams bloody murder. And all the servants come running in because she screams so loud and say, well, what's wrong? And she said, oh, he tried to attack me. And he left his robe, and when I screamed, he ran out of the house. What did she just say? That was a big lie. And then she waited for her husband to come home. And so when he came home, she's still standing there with the coat, and she thought, I'm going to get even with him. And so she shows him the coat. She said, that man that you trusted, boy, he tried to attack me, and he had his coat off, and he ran out, and see, he left his cloak here. You know, you were the one who gave him this coat. And so Potiphar said, oh, I'm going to throw him in the dungeon. What's interesting about this is that the dungeon was probably in the basement of this house, because Potiphar was in charge of the Pharaoh's dungeon. And they said it was in Potiphar's house. So we're going to see the dungeon here. I want you to notice this about Joseph. First, Joseph had been wearing the robe of a prince there at home. And then he was sold into another country where he didn't speak the language and they had the different idols. But he ended up being a slave for Potiphar. Now he's gone further down. He was accused of something he didn't do, and now he's in a dungeon. Do you notice that everything keeps getting worse for Joseph? Joseph is sort of a picture of Jesus. Jesus left heaven, and was no longer who he was, God in heaven, and he came down to earth to be a person and to be a servant. So he's, in a sense, going down like Joseph was. And then Jesus was accused falsely and killed. And yet God brought him back up and he was raised to glory. Well, Joseph, everything is getting worse for Joseph. Have you noticed that? Joseph did pass that temptation test. He did well with that, but God didn't seem to help him for that. He got thrown in prison for it. You know, when you get punished and you didn't do what was wrong, that's really hard to take. And Joseph didn't do anything wrong, and he is now in prison. And Joseph again seemed to decide, well, there's no point in sitting around and thinking how mad I am at my brothers. Now, I'm mad at God. If God cared about me, he wouldn't have let this happen. He could have thought about that all the time. Instead, he thought, well, I'm a prisoner. I guess I'll be the best prisoner this prison ever had. Can you see the prison? That's the prison guard he's talking to, and he has keys. Well, what he did, he sort of gave Joseph a little better outfit, and he gave him some keys to the prison. Did you notice that? And so Joseph is able now to be kind of in charge of the prison. And the leader of the prison knows that Joseph's not going to use the keys and escape. I find that very interesting. And he puts other prisoners in Joseph's charge. Joseph's in charge of other prisoners. Because Joseph decided that he'd do well, God is using him. And so 2 men were sent to prison by Pharaoh. And we're going to show those. The guard can go away. This one, the chubby one, was the baker. The one in yellow is the baker for Pharaoh. And the other one was the cupbearer. I'm going to call them the butler and the baker. The butler was really what he would do, he would squeeze the grapes and have the drink for Pharaoh, and then he would take a sip of it to see if it was poisonous. and if it wasn't poisonous, he would give it to Pharaoh. It was a very important job because Pharaoh didn't want to be murdered. And the baker made wonderful, tasty things for Pharaoh, but for some reason, Pharaoh got unhappy with those two and threw them in prison. And so Joseph there is in charge of those two. Well, one day the two of them were looking sad, and Joseph said, well, what's the matter? And they said, well, we each had a dream last night. So Joseph said, well, tell me your dream. And the butler, the wine taster there, said, well, I had the grapes and I was squeezing them into the cup, and I made the glass there for the Pharaoh, and there were 3 branches. Do you notice? Maybe Jesse can show you. There are 3 groups of grapes. There we are. And so he said, I squeezed them in and gave them to Pharaoh, and he took that. And Joseph said, oh, I know what your dream means. Those 3 clusters of grapes are 3 days. And in 3 days, Pharaoh's going to call you in, and he is going to reinstate you and make you his wine taster again. And again, you will squeeze the grapes for Pharaoh, and you'll get your old job back. Well, the baker's listening to this, and he thinks, oh, that sounds really good. I hope I get such a good interpretation for my dream. And so he said, hey, I want to tell you my dream. So the baker says, well, I'm walking along. He saw himself in the dream, and he had 3 baskets, of all sorts of wonderful cakes and breads and wonderful things that he made. And he's walking along, but do you notice that the birds have come? And the birds are eating some of his wonderful cakes out of those baskets. Oh, Joseph said, the 3 baskets are 3 days. And in 3 days, Pharaoh will call for you, and he's going to have you killed on a pole. And you'll be tied to the pole, and the birds are going to come and eat your body. Well, that wasn't a very happy thing, but maybe the baker thought, well, maybe Joseph was wrong. Well, in 3 days, it was Pharaoh's birthday. And so the Pharaoh called for the butler and the baker to come to his, and he wants to make a ruling on them. And so he called the butler and the baker in. And he started with the butler, the wine taster, and he said, I'm going to give you your old job back. And so we're going to have a picture of him here, and he's squeezing the grapes, and he got his old job back, and he's quite happy. He's out of prison, and he's back to where he was. And so, of course, the baker's quite happy. He's thinking, well, maybe it'll be good. But he says to the baker, take this man, and so the other, take him out, kill him on a pole. And that was the end of the baker. Well, when Joseph had interpreted the dream, he said to the wine taster, when you go back to Pharaoh and you are squeezing the wine for him, will you tell Pharaoh that I'm here so that Pharaoh will take me out of prison? Well, he forgot. The wine taster forgot. He never said anything to Pharaoh. Did you notice how nothing's going right for Joseph? Are you noticing this? He had 2 more years that he was in prison because the butler forgot him. Okay, there's Joseph. And again, you know, sometimes people say, well, I don't love God anymore. I can't love God. I can't believe in God anymore because these bad things have happened to me. And if God was really true and who he says he is, God wouldn't have let these bad things happen to me. Well, Joseph didn't think that way. Everything, you notice everything bad's been happening to him, and he still thinks, well, I'm going to do the best I can and honor God. I want you to notice something else about this. Does Joseph have a Bible? No. Does Joseph have a Christian friend? Does Joseph have a church? No. I think it's amazing that Joseph has stayed so close to God without any of these helps. He's been it's been really, truly amazing that he has this trust in God, and he feels God has a plan for his life, even though he can't figure it out. Well, we're going to go back to the palace here, and we're going to see the butler squeezing the grapes. And this is 2 years after we were in the palace before. And the Pharaoh says, I had dreams last night. Get the magicians. I want the magicians to come in here and tell me what these dreams meant. And so, we're going to make some room here so we can see the dreams and see the magicians. All right, these are the magicians. And these guys say, we can tell you what dreams mean. So we're going to see the first dream that Pharaoh had. And he was in bed one night, and he was sound asleep, and he had a dream. And in the dream, there were 7 stalks of wheat. Can you see them on the left there? Jesse's going to show you. 7 stalks of wheat. And look how healthy they are. They're all plump and wonderful looking stalks of wheat. And then, Daniel, maybe you can show us on the right hand, the right hand side, the skinny stalks of wheat. Oh my, they look awful. There's hardly any nutrition in that. And then he had a really strange thing happen in his dream. The 7 stalks of skinny wheat ate up the good ones. And so he woke up and he thought, well, what did that mean? Can we take it off? And he had a second dream. In the second dream, he saw the Nile River, and he saw these cows at the bottom. These big fat cows came up out of the Nile River, and oh, they looked healthy and wonderful. And then these awful scrawny, you can see all their bones, the ones in back, and they looked just terrible. They came up out of the Nile River. And then they ate up the fat cows. And he thought, I have no idea what these dreams mean. So he asked his magicians, what did those dreams mean? And the magicians said, we don't have any idea. Well, we don't have the cupbearer. The cupbearer's been standing there working and hearing this. Ah, there we go. And when the magicians are, okay. And so the cupbearer says, oh, I remember now. I remember when that man in prison interpreted my dream. And when he gave the interpretation, he said to Pharaoh, why don't you take him over and talk to Pharaoh? He said, why, he gave an interpretation to your baker and to me. We had dreams. And everything turned out just exactly the way he said. He knew how to interpret dreams. And Pharaoh said, get him right now and bring that man here. And so we're going to go back to the prison, and the captain of the guard says, the head of the prison comes to Joseph and says, quick, I want you to shave. Oh, by the way, Joseph has a beard. Can we have Joseph with it? He has a good Jewish beard. Oh, there he is. Because did you notice in our pictures, well, these prisoners seem to have beards, but did you notice that the Egyptians never have beards? And the Jewish people, when I show those, they always do have beards. Well, Joseph had a beard. And the guard said, well, quick, shave your beard, and I'm going to give you some clothes. You can't go Pharaoh looking like that. And so Joseph shaved, and he got the new clothes. Can you see the clothes? He looks a lot better. He's ready to go see Pharaoh. So now we're going to take Joseph to Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh says, I hear that you can tell what dreams mean. And Joseph said, well, no, actually, I can't. But God can tell you what dreams mean. And so Pharaoh said, okay, I'm going to tell you the dreams. And he told him again about the 7 stalks of wheat and the skinny stalks of wheat. And when the 7 skinny ones ate up the fat ones, they were just as skinny as before. In the same way with the cows. The skinny ones ate the fat ones, and they were just as skinny as before. And Joseph said, well, I know what it means. The 7 are 7 years. And Egypt's going to have 7 years where there's just lots and lots of food. Just food everywhere. And then Egypt's going to have 7 years of famine. And they won't even remember the 7 years of plenty. It's like when the animals got eaten up. He said, this is what you need to do. You need to find somebody who can have food stored for 7 years and kept, because in the 7 years of famine, that's what the people will eat, the food from the 7 years that was stored. You need to have somebody in charge of a whole program for this. And Pharaoh said, well, I don't know that there's anybody better than you. And so he got a fancy outfit, and he dressed Joseph up in an outfit that was meaning that he was the second highest, second only, that's it, second only to Pharaoh. So we're going to put Joseph here in his new clothes. And he thought, you know, Egyptians don't like Jews. So I think I won't use his Jewish name, Joseph. I'm going to give him, and Daniel's going to give us the name that he...
Zaphenath-Paneah.
And that was his Egyptian name. And he thought, I need to give him a wife and a palace. And so, do we have the palace? He gave him a wife, an Egyptian wife. And this is now Joseph's, you understand that morning he woke up in prison, and now this is his house. That's a pretty fancy house. He gave him a wife. He gave him an Egyptian wife so that the people of Egypt would feel that Joseph was one of them. And her name was Asenath. And so now he's got a home and a wife and these clothes. He's second in command, and he got something else. He got a chariot. And so Joseph could ride all over Egypt in his chariot, and he could look and see where the crops were, where the farms were, where they could build storehouses to store it. He rode all over Egypt, and he made his plan. I want you to see again how he was like Christ. If he had sat in jail and said, oh, those brothers, if I ever see them again, I'm going to show them, would God have been able to use him? Would he have brought him out of prison? Everything got worse and worse, and then he was raised up. It's like Christ. Everything got worse and worse till he died on a cross, and then he came alive. And Joseph is kind of a picture of Christ. And Joseph could do that because he didn't say, I don't like God. God let bad things happen to me. He said, well, I'm going to try to please God and do my best no matter where I am. And he didn't fall for Mrs. Potiphar's temptation. Remember when Jesus was tempted by Satan? Jesus did not say yes either. And so when we come back and see this again, we're going to see what happens to Joseph here. But I just wanted you to know that bad things do happen to us. It's just we're here in a fallen world, and we can't say, well, God must not love me or he wouldn't let it happen, or I'm not going to love God because he let that happen. Because we ruin our own lives when that happens. Joseph did not think like that. He did not ruin his life. God raised him up, and wonderful things are going to happen. It'll be the same in your life. You say, well, I'm going to keep on doing what God wants me to do. And God will honor your life and bring you good things if you do that. So let's close in prayer. Lord, we just thank you for this story of Joseph. Thank you for his example that without Christian friends and without a Bible, without a church, he went on being close to you. And everything he did, he tried to please you, even though things went very badly for him. And Lord, you honored him and raised him up, and he's going to be used in a mighty way for you with his family and with the country of Israel. And I pray that we would take his example, and we would always try to honor you and please you in everything we do. And we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.